This episode is proudly brought to you by the TPG Telecom Foundation, dedicated to creating opportunities to improve the health, well-being and education of Australian communities in need. Hi, I'm Megan Gilmour, Missing School co-founder and CEO, and this is Live and Learn. This is the podcast that unearths insights at the intersection of health and education, building a powerful alliance to keep kids with complex health conditions connected to school from anywhere. The podcast is recorded on Ngunnawal land, and we acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of this land and the land on which you're listening. Welcome to our weekly webcast, a place to zero in on the interplay between health and education and to amplify the voices of those supporting students to navigate their educational journeys despite complex health challenges. And today on Live and Learn, we have with us Dr. Hannah Brown. Dr. Hannah Brown is the Education and Young People Manager at RUOK, Australia's national suicide prevention charity dedicated to inspiring meaningful conversations about mental health. Hannah leads strategies to boost awareness and engagement across schools, university and TAFEs, meeting young people where they are at. She strives to provide them with the knowledge, skills and confidence to start RUOK conversations and to help break down the stigma surrounding mental health. Welcome to Live and Learn. Hannah, we're so pleased to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so today we're here to talk about supporting school connections for students with complex medical or mental health challenges. Let's head to the first question. Hannah, tell us how mental ill health impacts kids and why it's something every Australian needs to know and care about.
Yeah, so currently in Australia, 1 in 7 children and adolescents aged 4 to 17 years are currently experiencing a mental health illness. We also know that half of all adult mental health challenges emerge before the age of 14, and more than 50% of children experiencing mental health challenges are not receiving professional help. And we also know that 7 out of 10 of the most common presentations to paediatricians are for mental health. So it's a huge problem, and I think those statistics just really reflect that.
Absolutely. You've taken us right there, right out of the gates, and it is an absolutely critical issue for every Australian to understand. And we're talking about young people here, but obviously it affects people across the whole spectrum of the population, and also those startling facts about diagnosis and maybe not getting the help that people need. So that leads us into the next question. Many people probably assume things about mental ill health. What's the million-dollar question you get from parents or loved ones when, or kids themselves, when they're in the context of the diagnosis or even in a situation where we believe that there's a mental ill health issue going on?
So the number one question that I get from parents and from loved ones when I'm out the road traveling as part of our conversation convoy, going to community events, is always, how can I, as a parent or a loved one, support my child experiencing mental ill health? And it's obviously a huge question. But at RUOK, we have a really simple 4-step conversation model, and it's called ALEC, ALEC, to help guide people through this conversation. Did you want me to go through the steps of the ALEC model?
Yeah, well, I think that kind of captures the next question, which is what's the most important thing you want them to know? If that's is it ALEC? Is that Okay, let's do it.
Absolutely. Because, as I said, that's a question that I receive a lot while I'm working. And a lot of the times that I speak to parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles is that they always say, I'm not a health professional, I'm not a psychologist, I don't feel qualified to have this conversation. But the 4-step model It is really simple, and it just really reinforces that anyone can have this conversation. You don't have to have a qualification. And the first step is A, for ask. And, as your child's parent or loved one, you are absolutely fully qualified to ask them if they're okay and to encourage them to express their feelings. It's important in this step that you're just there to support the child, encourage them to be honest in talking about their feelings, and also not passing any judgment or feelings of your own that you might be having. I think the most important thing to take away from the ask step is to just ask in a genuine way. So, you don't have to use the words, "Are you okay?" It's whatever way that feels genuine for you and for the child. But it's also important to make sure that you're in the right headspace to ask this question first. And that if you are, that you have adequate time to listen to them. So that takes us into the second step, which is L for listen. And listening might seem like a really easy concept, but it's actually extremely hard to be a good listener, especially when you are having this conversation with a loved one, with your child, because it's human nature for us to kind of want to jump in and fix the problem. But that's not actually helpful at this stage of the conversation. It's really important to just sit back and listen and give them the time to just sit with them. So, remove all distractions, give the child your full attention. Don't be on your phone. Learn to sit in the silence and the possible discomfort that brings, which again can be quite tricky to do, but it really gives time for the child to open up. And you can also, reflect back on what the child's saying, repeat back to make sure that you've understood. And I often hear from parents that when they're trying to talk to, especially their teenagers, the best thing that they do is they take them for a drive. So it just removes that awkwardness that can often be found when, you're having this conversation, making that direct eye contact. It can be a bit awkward. So parents often say, look, I'll just take my teenager for a drive. We're not looking at each other, but we're still having that conversation. And then that takes us into the third step, which is E for encourage action. And this will look different depending on the situation and depending on the conversation. But the main thing to keep in mind is that you ask your child how you can support them rather than telling them what to do. So you can ask them, what do you need from me right now? What can I do to support you? And if your child has been feeling really down or not in a good place for a couple of weeks, that's when it might be time to bring in some professional support. So, calling Kids Helpline, calling Lifeline or Beyond Blue. And I really encourage you to make that phone call together so your child is included. It's not something that's happening to them. And same if you're booking them a GP appointment, make that phone call with them. And then the fourth and final step is check in. So this might be, the next day or a few days later, and it's just checking back in with your child and saying, how have you been feeling since we last had that chat? Is there anything else I can do to support you? And just making sure that check-in is a regular thing, it's not a one-off, it's a regular conversation.
That's such a great framework, and I'm sure we'll get into some deeper parts of that. And I've had my own experience of this and making all the mistakes that, including wanting to solve, wanting to fix, and the ways that just doesn't work. And I really recognize one of those points very strongly that you made, which is to actually listen and be with someone in that is an incredibly uncomfortable experience. And often we're offering solutions because we're trying to solve our own discomfort about what that person's expressing. Where we want it to go away, we want it to stop. So that's we start pulling out our checklist of how to fix it. And that really resonated with me, is to listen and to be without trying to solve in that way of telling people what to do or just get over it. Is so uncomfortable. But in my own experience, when I when I understood that and came to know it, really, really created the actual empathy.
Yeah.
Because you're with the feelings, you're with them, you're having to have them yourself.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to just discharge it, you know?
Absolutely. There's a saying that, we need to listen to understand, not to react. So we're not thinking about what we're saying next. We're just listening to understand what they're
yeah. And what you find is sometimes you just really don't know what to say when you're not trying to fix it.
Absolutely.
Yes. So such a great framework and so helpful for people to have that, just coming back to those 4 things. And I loved the E because I thought you were going to go to empathy, and then you went to, an action-oriented step that involves both people.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, incredible. Hannah, we'd love to know if you're willing to share what brought you into the world of, suicide prevention, mental health, supporting people with mental ill health.
Yeah. So not many people grow up thinking that they'll work in suicide prevention as their career, and I certainly didn't. I actually studied nutrition and dietetics. I did my undergrad in that degree. I did my PhD in that degree. Was very much on track to work in academia in nutrition and dietetics, but unfortunately lost a close friend to suicide towards the end of my PhD. And it was that loss that just, as suicide does, it has a ripple effect on so many people, and it absolutely had a ripple effect on everyone who knew him, including myself. And that was the reason that I pretty much decided that, I'm leaving nutrition and dietetics behind. I need to get into mental health and suicide prevention, which was a bit of a challenge after, doing a different path for almost 8 years. But I'm so grateful to be in this role. And my friend, when he passed away, he was only 25. So, young people in mental health and suicide prevention is absolutely my passion. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. Are you okay?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and sorry for your loss. To actually take that next step, and your lived experience into the future with you to make a difference for other people is profound and a gift. So we're really thankful and grateful to you for that, and the work that you're doing in the community, which is, based on the statistics which tell the numbers story, but they don't tell the qualitative story of the impact, do they? And just how profound that loss is for so many people.
Yes.
So just, yeah, our thanks to you for your work.
Oh, thank you.
So knowing all that you know, what's your biggest hope for kids, for young people with or experiencing mental ill health, their families and loved ones when navigating this, really difficult circumstance?
I think I have a few, not just one. The first one is to know that they're not alone, because especially as a young person, when they are struggling, it's very easy to have the mindset that, no one else feels this way. There's something wrong with me. Why does my brain work like this? So just letting them know that they're not alone in what they're going through. So many people are experiencing it. And to know that support is out there. So we are lucky in Australia that we do have free support in the form of Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline. There's 24/7 support lines that young people can access. So for them to know about them. And the really great thing with those, including Lifeline, is that they have text support services and web chat support services, because it's really hard to make a phone call when you are feeling awful, especially for young people. So to know that there's other ways for them to receive support, and that can just be a text or a conversation with someone online through the Lifeline web chat. Another hope that I have is for young people to be able to reach out when they are struggling. We know that young people in particular find it particularly hard to do that, to put their hand up and say, I'm having a hard time. So that's why checking in on each other is so important, because, we just never know what people are going through. So that's why we need to have this check-in any time of the year, not waiting until Mental Health Month or Are You Okay Day, but making it part of everyday conversations.
Thank you. And knowing that it was Are You Okay Day last week, which, brings that to mind and makes that palpably, clear to people, well, reminder, I should say. What would you say? How would we know to ask people, are you okay? Or any other language, as you said earlier, that might suit you or feel more natural to you? Is it that we notice, they're a bit different? What are the things that we should use as our kind of, in our busy worlds and lives with our own things, how should we recognize the time to do that?
Yeah, so you're exactly right in that recognizing when someone is acting not like themselves, so their behavior is a little bit different than normal. So for young people in particular, they might not be returning each other's texts, or they might not be turning up to sport practice, or someone who's really normally quite extroverted and outgoing has now become quite withdrawn. Or it could even be the other way, that someone who's normally, keeps to themselves is now very outgoing, or they might be going out every night, or they might be drinking or posting things on social media that they wouldn't normally post. So how they're acting is certainly one thing that we look at. We also look at what people are saying. So this one's a little bit harder to pick up on, because it's not quite as common, I don't think, that people actually express how they're feeling. So if they are just talking in a more negative way than normal, like they might be saying things like, no, I feel like a burden, no one cares about me, what's the point of planning things, there's nothing to look forward to. So just that really negative language. And then the third thing that we look at is what's going on in their life. So we all have bad days, we all have ups and downs, but there are certain events that can be red flags. So relationship breakdown is a huge one, especially for males. So if there has been, a breakup, or parents getting divorced, that's a huge risk factor. As well as, there might be illness in the family, or they might be moving house, or there might be financial stress. So if you do know of someone who is going through a big life event, again, that's another time to just check in and say, I know that you're having a really hard time at the moment with your parents or with your relationship, so I just wanted to check in.
Yeah, and something else comes to mind for me now. It probably should just be something that we're doing naturally with each other all day, because on top of all those things that you mentioned, which are just part of life, and actually all of the things that you can feel as a human in a single day, all of the things, joy, grief, despair, boredom, whatever. But we're also facing a lot of existential crises, and particularly, I notice, but also obviously it's in the news and is being talked about, is that's having a particular effect on young people, as it would. as the custodians of the future. And it's like, well, what kind of future are you making for us here that we've got to try and look after? And, you know, the democratic unrest and the fake news and there's a lot. There's so
There's
much.
so much.
Yeah.
There's so much. And young people, yeah, they're just constantly exposed to it. It's on their phones, and that's something that we never dealt with growing up. You know, if there was something happening at school, we went home and, you know, we were at home and we might watch the news, but we didn't have this 24/7 access to all of the awful things going on. So
That's right. And you know, which parts of them do you accept as truth as well? Or anything that's in our feeds, and that includes everything from social media to news media to just whatever's being transmitted in the day, messages between people as well. So there's a lot going on there, and it just makes me think that, you know, even a hand on a shoulder at times might just be a moment of connection. And of course, we've got the loneliness epidemic as well. So there's just so much out there, and I think this is you know, this checking in is a real a moment of connection apart from anything else, isn't it? Just
and I think, as you said,
micro connection.
we need it now more than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to our questions, so what are some of the common and perhaps frustrating public misconceptions about mental ill health, and how have you seen this impact families?
So, unfortunately, with mental health in general, there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation out there. With young people in particular, we know that while their awareness of mental health is quite high, so they know about things like depression and anxiety, the stigma of appearing weak and vulnerable is even higher. So it's this stigma that unfortunately prevents a lot of young people from reaching out for support because they don't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable, especially among their peers. So again, that's why it comes back to the importance of young people checking in on each other, because they're not very likely to put their own hand up and ask for help.
Yeah, and also, as you said before, feeling like, why is it me? I'm the only one, everyone else seems to be doing well, is also one of the greatest misconceptions ever, because basically everyone's having some form of personal existential struggle. I mean, that's what it is to be human. But it's harder to know that when you're young and you haven't made many laps around the sun.
Exactly. And what we see and what young people see on social media, it's a very curated feed, and people only ever show the best of what's happening in their lives. They don't show all of the other stuff going on. So that also creates fiction, I think, because we think it's real life, but it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. To be human is to experience all of the things. And I think some, you know, for young people, it's like, just wait a little while, just wait it out, you know. The more you practice those things, those struggles, it doesn't never becomes any easier. But you realize that you got through it the last time. That's just about all, you know?
Exactly. And you do learn coping mechanisms and skills on how to get through things.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes those are just wait it out, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's only, saying it's so much different from the experience, right? So, Hannah, how many, you've told us before, but it's worth repeating again here, how many Australian children and youth are living with mental ill health right now?
Yeah, so it's 1 in 7 children and adolescents, and that's those aged 4 to 17. And as I said before, I think something that's really eye-opening is that more than half of all the adult mental health challenges, so things that we're dealing now as adults, actually emerge before the age of 14. So it just shows, again, the importance of mental health in childhood, and these things that, you know, we go through as children or as teenagers that we might not think matter. But then, you know, 20 years down the track, it's like, oh, okay, actually, that was quite important in shaping my life and my mental health as an adult. So,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, and it's so true. I mean, there are some things that later in life seem inconsequential as things that happened, but that if you have ongoing conversations with yourself across life, you realize actually had a huge impact on you.
Absolutely.
And because you were particularly vulnerable at that moment, it could just have been a moment in time where that thing felt just like everything, you know? And I just know this myself as I've traced back my life and certain experiences that I have as an adult. I've uncovered and mined through my life, and the memory pops up. And you realize it could have been in primary school, it could have been, yeah, in the big picture, it looks inconsequential, but it was just profound. So I really relate to what you're saying there about, you know, where things start. And if you might not even know that it needs to be addressed, but it can really carry through and grow.
Absolutely.
Grow internally.
There's a reason why psychologists always ask about childhood. You know, we might think, oh, why are they asking me about my childhood? But then they start going, oh, okay, so maybe this thing that happened, or, you know, this thing when you were a teenager has actually had an impact on how you deal with things now, or how you regulate your emotions. So huge impact.
Yeah, and how we frame things at that age, or how we frame things generally, makes such a difference to how we feel about it. It's just, you know, that's just how it is. So that's really something to pay attention to as well, because it means, I suppose, if we have more conversations with people at the time that things take place, if they stand out, if there's things that stand out, then we might be able to nip those things in the bud before they take on a life of their own, and resolve them sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Deal with it in childhood before it then, as you say, comes into adulthood and the rest of your life.
Yeah. And an are you okay moment when we've had a disagreement with someone, or something's not going so well, or, you know, to be able to check in and come back to it might just leave that door open a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there a risk of delayed diagnosis in cases of, you know, mental unwellness or ill health? Do you recognize that in your work?
So there is definitely a risk, because there are not always physical signs that someone is struggling with their mental health. You know, it's often not like our physical health. If we break our leg, it's quite obvious that we have a broken leg. But mental health issues, they often can't be seen. So, and we know for younger children, they might not explicitly say that they're feeling anxious or they're feeling sad because they don't have that vocabulary yet. But there might be other signs. So they might say something like, you know, their tummy hurts, or they feel sick. They might not want to go to school or hang out with their friends, which, you know, normally they love going to school and seeing their friends. So it's really picking up on, as I mentioned before, any behavior that's outside of how they normally behave. And yeah, it is hard because, especially with younger children, they don't have the words often to describe how they're feeling. And then as teenagers, they might have the words, but there's that stigma that's preventing them from saying the words.
Yeah, and the differences that you have as a teenager too in relation to adults, where you're carving your own path. And so you see this distinction between, you know, well, you as an adolescent, perhaps, and, you know, the boomers or whatever.
All the generations.
Yeah, and I think that's really a good one with younger children. It's, yeah, the words aren't there perhaps. So that's what we need to recognize. And the important point you made about invisible illness versus visible illness, and then the legitimacy, the perceived legitimacy
Yes.
between those two things. A broken leg is legitimate, cancer is legitimate. You know, an injury is obvious and legitimate, but are you really anxious? Are you really, oh no, can we just talk you out of that? You know,
Yes. Or, you know,
that's,
just calm down. Just
yeah,
take a breath.
yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where the stigma comes back into it, because even, you know, adults and the Australian population in general, we've really only been having these conversations openly for the past maybe 20 years, if that. So there is still so much stigma with, you know, because you can't see it, people think, oh, it's not there. But we know that suicide is the leading cause of death for young people.
Yeah.
So
Just shocking, just
it
shocking.
is. It is.
Mm.
But so, yeah, just because we can't see something, it doesn't mean that it's not there and it's not having a huge impact on the person.
That's right. And the number of cases that result in suicide are smaller than the number of cases of people living with it.
Yes.
So, you know, it's a huge issue. And what other kinds of complications? I think we've spoken about some of these already, but what other complications do kids with mental ill health face?
Yeah, so children and young people with mental health issues are significantly more likely to miss school compared to their peers without mental ill health. And anxiety disorders are among the most frequent but often under-recognized mental health problems found in the students who refuse to attend school.
Mm.
And then obviously this can be a vicious cycle, missing school, they fall behind academically, become more withdrawn from their peers, makes them more likely not want to go to school. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right in our wheelhouse now.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come back to that because we're about to delve into the school bit. Can mental, you know, health issues also lead to physical health issues as well? Do you see that as a complication?
Yeah, we definitely do. In many different ways. So, with anxiety, for example, some people who experience anxiety attacks or panic attacks, for them, they can be very physical. So, they can have very physical symptoms of their body reacting. We know our bodies react differently to stress, whether that's being, you know, nauseous and vomiting, or even having skin rashes and things like that. So absolutely mental health struggles can result in physical symptoms. And we know that, as you mentioned before, loneliness, they're now looking at the physical impact of loneliness on people and comparing it to, you know, to
worse than smoking.
Yeah, and to having a sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it has a huge impact on physical health.
Yeah, and the two go hand in glove, really, given that they're taking place in the same body. And I don't know if you saw this, but there's just a recent study out of the UK done on a large population to say that you know, unsurprisingly, but the data is there that mental health worsens with school isolation. So missing school exacerbates or can cause mental ill health and vice versa. So it's a vicious cycle there. And that large scale study, you know, confirming that.
Yeah.
How are siblings and peers of kids who experience, you know, mental ill health impacted, and what should families be across?
So for siblings or peers, it can be really frustrating, especially if they don't understand what's happening. So, we were just talking about if they can't see it physically, it can be really hard for them to understand what's going on. So that's why it's really important that parents, families talk to the children, the siblings, the peers about what's going on, and also recognize their feelings and that they might be feeling frustrated or upset, because it can be really upsetting that, their sibling or their friend is struggling, but they don't know what to do to make them feel better. So for parents and for teachers and for loved ones, just reinforcing that they just need to be there for them, checking in with them regularly, and also reinforcing that it's not their job to fix anything, which is what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Their support and their kindness is what's really important. And that's really all they need to do.
Yeah. And would you recommend ALEC for siblings and peers as well?
Yeah, absolutely. ALEC is great because it can be used by anyone. Doesn't matter about age, education level. We talk about ALEC with young children in terms of being a good friend and being kind to each other and checking in on each other. So yes, absolutely use ALEC.
Yeah. And do you just want to repeat what that framework is? It's ask, listen, engage, action, is it?
Encourage action.
Encourage action.
Yeah, perfect.
And what was the last one?
And check in.
And check in, yeah. Yeah. Virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
What's the current population of school-age children experiencing mental ill health, and how accurate is this data? Is it tracked, for example? Can we trust the numbers?
Yeah, so we look to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare for all of this data. And yeah, it's basically what I was saying before with the 1 in 7 children.
Between 4 and 17?
Between 4 and 17, yes.
Yeah, so with a 4 million student population in Australia, I put that at 571,000 kids.
My gosh. It's
500,000.
Yeah. And we often hear people saying things like, oh, back in my day, especially older people saying, back in my day, there was no such thing as anxiety and depression, and all the kids were fine. But we know that that's not the case.
They weren't.
Mental health issues have always been around. It's just that now we're talking about them and we're recognizing them and helping people get support. Whereas obviously, before it wasn't spoken about. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And life is so much more complex now in other ways as well. So we've got, as we talked about, kind of the existential threats are more than just war. There's a lot going on there. And so yeah, the pressures, the 21st century pressures, bringing their own effects and impacts as well.
Absolutely.
So now that we know that we're talking about 570,000 school kids, what's the critical, do they miss a lot of school, and why? So you did say that school attendance is affected. Would you like to make further comment on that one?
Yeah, so children with an anxiety disorder miss more than twice the number of school days than other children. And then that difference becomes greater in high school. So you ask, why is this the case? There's quite a few different reasons. The first is that symptoms themselves can make school attendance hard. So anxiety can make mornings really overwhelming. There's panic attacks, that could be stomach aches, refusal to get out of bed or leave the house. Depression, we know, can cause fatigue, low motivation. But then there's also physical complaints that we were talking about before that are tied to mental health. So these could be headaches, nausea, feeling sick. So again, more reasons why they're not staying home. And then finally, school can be a stress trigger for a lot of these kids, especially if there is bullying. We know stigma is a huge issue. And then also looking around academic pressure or fear of failure, particularly when we're looking at really high stress times like exams.
Yeah.
So yeah,
yes,
quite a few reasons.
Yeah, the expectations and the whole rhythm of school could be quite challenging for a lot of young people, which is what we're seeing as well.
Yeah.
And I suppose another one, which is in your wheelhouse too, is eating disorders or, changes in eating, enjoyment of food, or relationship to food when you're feeling anxious or depressed.
Yeah. And then having to be monitored while they're eating. They might be hospitalized. So obviously can't attend school then. Yeah.
Yeah. So affecting all of those, primary bodily functions.
Yeah.
This being the case, what are the critical times in the school life of a kid who's facing mental health issues?
Yeah, so critical times are really any time of transition or change. So we know going from primary school to high school is a huge stress for all young people, not just those experiencing mental ill health. Finishing high school and then deciding, do they go to uni or TAFE or have a gap year or work is obviously a very stressful time for young people. If they have to change schools, that can lead to quite a lot of stress as well. And as I mentioned before, times of high stress, so exams, the HSE, for example, very stressful time. I still have nightmares about my HSE, and I did mine a very long time ago. So
wow.
The impact of
that's a lot. Yeah, the psychological impact of it, the pressure.
Huge, absolutely huge. So yeah, those times of transition and change or times of high stress. Yeah.
And of course, again, with a lower or fewer experiences in life, the experiences you are having, like, changing a school year or a school or whatever, they're monumental in terms of the amount of time you've lived. You know what I mean? It's like if these things are happening, once, and you're a 7-year-old, it's like that's a large proportion of the child's life to go through that transition and feel that experience. And thank you for mentioning those. It's always such an interesting answer to that one across medical conditions and mental health issues. The transitions is the thing that comes up the most. I mean, puberty is another, but you could say that's a transition, isn't it? Kind of biological transition that a human's making. And yeah, these times of change just create a greater burden or disruption to business as usual, which creates additional stresses. What should families and schools be prepared for then at different times?
So supporting kids or adolescents with mental health issues isn't just about one moment in time, like it is for anyone experiencing mental ill health. And so families and schools often need to anticipate different challenges at different stages of a child's journey. So any of those examples that we were just talking about, if there's exams coming up, if they're moving into a high school from primary school. And this is why checking in regularly is so important. Listening without judgment, again, is so important. Keeping any negative emotions like frustration and our own frustration out of the conversation. And for both families and the schools to ask the child what they can do to support them, which goes back to the ALEC model before, that trying not to tell them what to do, but rather include them in the conversation and ask how they can be supported.
Yeah, amazing. This is a tricky one and it'd be a difficult one for people to hear. Is there anything different that we should do for somebody who we believe to have suicidal ideation or who's disclosed to us that they're having suicidal feelings and thoughts?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. But if we suspect that someone is feeling suicidal, or having those thoughts, the main thing to do is to ask them directly. So for a long time, people avoided doing this because there was this myth that asking about suicide would increase the person's risk of dying by suicide. But we know now that's not the case. There is plenty of research and evidence to show that it doesn't increase the risk, because most people know that it's an option. Like, you're not putting the idea in someone's head. So we do need to ask directly. We need to use the word suicide, because otherwise, if we say things like, oh, you know, you're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Or you're not thinking of hurting yourself. Well, for one, both of those statements have a lot of judgment to them and negative judgment, but they're also too broad. So hurting yourself, you know, that could mean anything. But we do need to ask directly about suicide. If they say yes, ask them if they have a plan. You know, okay, what are you thinking of doing? And try and keep that information. Remember that information, because you'll need to pass it on, you know, to a health professional, to a crisis support person. And I think, as awkward, you know, obviously people would feel very awkward asking that question, but I think it's important to keep in mind that it's actually really helping the other person, because it's extremely hard for someone to put their hand up and say, hey, I'm thinking of suicide. But it's so much easier if all they have to answer is yes. If someone comes up to them and asks them directly and all they have to say is yes, that's a huge burden taken off their shoulders. And then as I said, if they do have a plan, taking down the detail, but then bringing someone else in, whether that's, you know, a crisis support line or a GP, or, you know, you can always call 000 if you do think their life is in immediate danger as well.
Yeah, and continuing to keep those communication lines open.
Yes. Yep. Checking in. If they say no, but you don't believe them, you know, maybe asking again a little bit later, because at least the fact that you've asked, they know that they can go to you as a support person and you won't judge them.
And perhaps it gives them the message that you're paying attention to how you're viewing them. They're seen and their struggle is seen in its extremity. Could save a life.
Absolutely. It shows that someone cares about them, someone supports them. And that you're someone they can go to. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know that would be difficult for people to hear and talk about, but this is precisely why we need to talk about it and not stigmatize it, because it's life-saving. It's a life-saving conversation, potentially. And the stigma, as you keep saying and reminding us, is part of the problem here, is and, you know, making people feel ashamed of where they're at, or giving them the impression that their life's good and they shouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? That's some of the thing that goes on, which is, but you've got a great life. How could you? It's like we don't understand someone's inner world. We just, you know, very, very important. So thanks for taking us into your knowledge and experience with that. We're up to the part about what are the biggest challenges or vulnerabilities facing kids with mental ill health at school, and what's happening now to address that through our school systems. Is it enough? You might have covered some of these things. Please feel free to expand or reiterate what you've said to do with current vulnerabilities, and whether you think there's more that we could do in our school systems.
Yeah, so I'll say stigma again, because it is truly such a huge challenge for young people. That's that stigma and misunderstanding. You know, they don't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable. There's fear of being judged, as you said before with that example. You know, you have a great life. What are you upset about? Or being teased or bullied. Because again, it comes down to that misunderstanding of what mental ill health looks like. academic pressures, which we touched on before. So it can be really hard to concentrate on schoolwork and exams when your brain is foggy and your brain isn't allowing you to focus on those things, which then, as we spoke about, can lead to students falling behind academically. And then it's that vicious cycle. And then, and loneliness, which we've touched on. But you did ask the question, what's happening now to address these challenges? And I think it's been great to see that many mental health organisations in Australia, including RUAK, are now focusing on stigma and how it can be decreased with young people. One of the best ways to decrease stigma is to share real stories of lived experience. So on the RUAK website, we have our chit chat channel. And this is so that young people can see and hear that they're not alone in what they're struggling with, because they can see, oh, that person has a similar life to me, or that person reminds me of myself, and they're going through similar things to what I am. Sharing stories of hope is really important, but just really reinforcing the important role that peers play in checking in on each other. And making sure that, we're asking the question genuinely. It's not a joke. It's not something to be laughed at, because, if you are a young person struggling and you see someone in the playground making a joke about, are you okay, or about mental health in general, obviously that can really negatively impact that person. So,
or people watching.
Exactly.
Who aren't admitting.
You never know. You never know who's watching.
Well, 1 in 7, right? 1 in 7.
Exactly.
Just keep that number in mind. And
yes.
I also just want to add to this too, as an older person, is just to acknowledge the power differential between adults and young people, and the role that plays in mental well-being or not, and the kinds of things that can happen to young people or have happened to young people across their life by older people, and just the power infrastructure and the power difference, the difference in agency, meaning the challenges for a young person to get the resources, the energy, the agency, to even actually know the steps, because you've never done them before, towards like, how do you go about getting help? And then you've got potentially financial issues rolled up in there too, and family situations and struggles that are underpinning all of this or overarching all of this. So, and any number of things that are going on. And I think what you said at the beginning stood out for me, strikes me as well, is any human experiencing this is not broken. You're not the problem. It's something all humans navigate, and at different times and moments in the day and across life, it can be more severe than other times as well, which means the checking in is always, that's what we've got to do. We've got to not make assumptions. I've really taken that away from what you've said today as well.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned about the power difference between adults and young people, I think that's why we know that the peer-to-peer check-in is so important, because even from our own research at RUAK, we know that young people, they will talk to a peer before they talk to a parent, a health professional, anyone else, a teacher. They will go to a peer first.
Yes.
So it's making sure that young people feel comfortable in having these conversations. And again, the ALEC framework, it's so simple. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be have any qualifications to have the conversation. And that's why we do really need to encourage and keep encouraging young people to keep checking in on their peers.
Yeah, kids stick together, honestly. there's power in numbers.
Mm.
It's just, stick together.
Yeah.
Do you want to just spell out ALEC again for us at this juncture?
Yes. Ask, listen, encourage action, and check in.
Yeah, beautiful. So that really brings us to the last point. And that is, well, is there anything else that you'd like to say about school quality of life for kids with mental health issues?
I think just making sure that there is a school culture that supports and encourages those regular check-ins. So this includes teachers role modeling, genuinely checking in on each other, making sure that these conversations aren't just happening in World Mental Health Month or on Are You OK Day. It's a year-round conversation. Because as we've been saying, the more normalized these conversations become, the less stigma there is. And then the more people that will reach out for help when they need it.
Yeah, every day, every moment of every day, there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway. And I'm definitely going to be more encouraged to practice that more obviously. Yeah. Because sometimes you also don't, you stand back a little bit and don't necessarily want to disrupt someone's privacy or something like that. But
Yes.
I think there's a lot of ways to do it, and
Yeah,
you've helped us see that. So what's your call to action, Hannah, for mental health in 7 words or less?
So I might be cheating because I'm going to use letters.
Do.
So it might be technically over 7 words, but it's to ask, are you okay, any day of the year?
Boom. That's perfect. And yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I really mean it when I said earlier that you've used your lived experience, and I suppose every moment of every day that you do this work, you're honoring your friend.
Thank you.
And that's the legacy, that you're providing. They'll never be forgotten. So,
to say.
Yeah, I know they'd be proud of you.
Thank you.
So a big shout out to Are You OK? You can find them over at www.ruok.org.au. Go there, give generously, practice ALEC, support the work in any way that you can, and let's get more aware and more active about our checking in with the people around us, even if it's someone at the bus stop. It doesn't have to be someone you know well. It could be anyone, really. Well, thank you for joining me on Live and Learn today, Hannah. It's been wonderful to chat with you today, and your generosity of knowledge and experience that you've shared with us, I'm sure will make a huge difference to the audience that gets to hear this webcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Help us turn up the volume so all kids are seen and heard. Follow along, like, share, comment, or leave us a review, because we love hearing from you. And if you want to donate, head to missingschool.org.au, because every dollar makes a difference.